Okay, here's a quick little tutorial on how to make the graphs for the stock market project based on your data from your data tables. So the first thing you want to do is in Google Drive, if you open up a new Google Sheet document, you don't need to title it or anything. This will just sort of be your workspace on creating your graph. If you want to title it, you can title it stock market or whatever, but it's not super necessary. Then I'm going to go to my stock market portfolio and I'm going to copy my entire chart. I'm going to press right click and copy, or you can do Control C, or you can do edit, copy, any of those options. And then you're going to go to the spreadsheet and you're going to go right click, paste, or Control V, or edit, paste, any of those options. So out of this chart, the only two columns that you actually need are the date and the rounded profit loss, so the integer. These other columns here you do not need to use, so we're going to get rid of them. And a quick way to get rid of the column is to click on this down arrow. There's a little drop down menu over here in the heading where B is. And if I go there, I can see there's an option called delete column. Now I can actually do two at once if I highlight both these columns that I don't want, and I can click on the drop down menu here and I can say delete columns B and C. So now I'm left with just the two columns I want. Now notice that there's a few of these that say error, and I also have this sort of hyphened line here. The first thing that you want to make sure you change is instead of the hyphen line, let's put a value in. So that's going to be 0. On our first day, we didn't make any profit or loss because we just purchased our shares. The reason why these say error is because in this program, it can do formulas. And the formulas always start off with either typing an equal sign or a plus sign. And because these ones here, if you look what they say, it has a positive sign or a plus sign here, the program actually thinks that it's a formula. So when you have an error message like this, you need to go and just delete the plus sign and the equal sign so that they just show up as integers instead of as a formula. So I'm going to go through these. I'm going to take those out. So now I have all the dates and I have all the profit losses rounded to the nearest integer. And so what I can do now is I'm actually going to change one thing here. On this here, I want to make sure that I do have $sign as well. And so I'm going to change this to rounded profit loss. And I have my unit, which is $. Now that I have all my information, if I highlight the stuff in the chart, I'm not going to highlight more than that. So I'm not going to do something like this. I'm not going to just highlight randomly over here. I'm not going to highlight these top two. I'm only going to highlight the headings and the data. And then I'm going to go either to this little image here, which looks like a little bar graph, or I can go to Insert Chart. Either one will get you to the same place. And the program is automatically going to make a graph for you. So it chooses line graph, so that's the one we actually want. And so let me see, looking around here, do I have everything I want? So along the x-axis, I want to make sure that I have all my headings. Notice it goes October 12th, 14th, 16th. It's sort of skipping a few days. And so if I click on this, so I've clicked on the axis, the horizontal axis menu pops up here. This is the chart editor. So when I click on the title, notice the title options come up. When I click on the y-axis comes up. So the menu will come up when you click on that specific part of the graph. So I want to treat the labels as text. And that will put in all of my dates, not just a few of them. Okay, so these are all the dates that are recorded in my chart. If you want, you can slant the labels. You can slant them on an angle like this if you want, or you can have them going straight down at 90 degrees, something like this, but I'm happy with them like this, that's fine. And then I have my x-axis label, so these represents the date. On this one here, I have my intervals on the y-axis. Notice they're all equally divided, so this is 25, and then it goes up by 25. But for rounded profit loss, I'm still missing my $sign. It's here, but I can't see it. So I'm going to make sure it's here so that I can see it. Okay, so rounded profit loss. So now I'm looking here, I see I have my y-axis label and my units, my x-axis label. There aren't really any units. I have all my stuff along my x-axis, everything along my y-axis, and I have my graph of my profits and losses every day. Now the only thing else I want to change here, now this is for company number 1, and so I'm going to call this graph number 1 as well. Every graph needs a number. So this is graph number 1, and an appropriate title. So this is the profit loss for Microsoft, that's the company, over the 2-week period. Notice that my title, in addition to having a graph number, has an appropriate title that describes what the data is actually showing. It doesn't just say graph 1 profit loss for Microsoft, it specifies the time period as well. And then if you want, you can do a whole bunch of stuff with your title. I can bold it, I can center it if I want. You can change the size if I want of that so that it'll all fit in one line. So you can play around with it a little bit to make it look nice. So I'm pretty happy with my graph now. I can do other things. I can add other grid lines and stuff like that if I wanted to. So I can make minor grid lines, which means that it might look like this. So I'd have more of these, so it might be easier to read. I can do the same. This is on the vertical axis, so I can do the same on the horizontal axis if I wanted to change those as well. But I think it's okay for now. Horizontal axis. I just can't. And now that I like my graph, I'm going to take this graph and I'm going to copy it right inside of my document. Now, right underneath the graph, there used to be something that said insert line graph here. We've already taken them out in this here, but yours might look something like this. Insert line graph here. There might be some sort of prompt or text. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this graph and put it in the place of this text. This text is just holding the place for the graph. And the way that you move the graph over is if I click on the graph, there's these 3 vertical lines, and that represents a menu. So I can click on this, and I'm going to go down to Publish Chart. Oops, sorry, wrong one. Copy Chart here. And then it's in the clipboard right now. I'll come over here, and I can paste. Now, this option will come in when you're pasting the chart. Link to spreadsheet means that the chart that you're putting in this Google Doc is still linked to the spreadsheet as well. So if you do have to make changes and you make changes on the spreadsheet, they'll automatically be reflected in your Google Doc as well. So this is probably the best option. Paste, unlink, just post it as a picture. So here's my graph right here. I have a graph number, I have an appropriate title, I have a y-axis label and the units, the x-axis label, all of my dates across the bottom, and it clearly shows how the graph changed over time. So this is how you make a graph. Let's say I did want to make some changes, so I went back here and I realized that this number was wrong. It wasn't actually -34, it was -14 instead. I changed that. Notice that it automatically changed on the graph here. And when I go back to my stock portfolio, when I click here, it hasn't changed here. But this button says update, and so now if I update it, it will change to correspond with what's in the actual spreadsheet. So that's the benefit of linking it to the spreadsheet, is as you make changes, they'll change automatically. Okay, so same thing if I went back here and I realized I made a spelling mistake somewhere, or that this was actually graph 2, for example, and I make the change here, I go back, I can go update, and it will automatically make the change in the graph right away. So it might be beneficial to do that. So that's how you make a graph. You have to do one for each of your companies. Make sure the graph is at least a half a page big. You don't want to have a little tiny graph like this that's hard to see. Okay, it's going to be really difficult if it's like this small. So you want to make sure that you take probably about a half a page to do your graph.